Um, Welcome everyone. Welcome to the UK UA STEM Pro, an educational STEM program for young researchers focused on building strong partnerships between universities and industries in Ukraine. The UK UA STEM Pro is an initiative of the Ukrainian President's Fund for Support of Education, Science and Sports, delivered in partnership with the University of Warwick, with the support of the UK-Ukraine Academic Diaspora Network and the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. It gives me so much pleasure to welcome Helen for our final talk of this program. Helen is a professor of film and television studies, and also the co-founder of the Centre for Television Histories, and the academic director of the Warwick Institute of Engagement. It's a really special department within the university that I'm sure Helen will tell you a little bit more about. And it's one of those things that if you're a colleague like me who are outside of Helen's field, you get to know Helen's work from the kind of community engagement and public engagement side of things. And then you start talking to colleagues from Helen's field, and then you realize how big of a deal Helen is in her home field, which, of course, if you know nothing about film and TV, you won't realize. So we really have someone super special with us today, a key colleague for the university for many different reasons. Certainly someone who's supported a lot of my work and I've learned a lot from. So when Helen and I were discussing this session, Helen immediately had so many different ideas about what she wanted to share. And I know that this session, certainly for me, I think is one of the most powerful of the whole program. I think it will bring a lot of the key messages we covered across the program back home. And I'm super excited to hand over to Helen. Helen, thank you so much for your time and being here today.
Thank you, Bo. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to listen and also to participate as well. So, as Bo said, I'm academic director of the Warwick Institute of Engagement. And when you say engagement in universities, engagement can mean lots of different things. For us, it particularly means public engagement. So, all the ways that the university's work touches, engages with, involves members of the public and our wider communities, both locally and further afield. This is what I'm going to cover in the presentation, and there'll be some opportunities for input and discussion and thought. I'll start with some definitions of public engagement and involvement, and really starting with asking you what those terms mean to you. I'm then going to kind of zoom in on this idea of the permeable university and what it means to be a university that both lets people in and also takes people out. So I'll talk a bit about permeability, and I'm going to be inviting you to think about what permeability might mean in your context. And then I'll say a little bit about the Warwick Institute of Engagement. I don't want to spend all the time talking about what we do at Warwick, but I'd love to share some examples, particularly of what public engagement and involvement in the STEM subjects at Warwick looks like and means to us. And then, yeah, we'll close with some discussion about that question of permeability, which I'll explain a bit more about. Now, I'm wondering whether, with all the sharing of screens and moving people about, whether I'll be able to see the chat, because I wanted, first of all, to invite you to put into the chat just some thoughts. Could be a single word, could be a sentence, could be a challenge, a provocation. What do you think about when you hear the term public engagement? And what I'm realizing is that public engagement means different things to different people at different times, certainly in different national contexts, but also in different disciplinary contexts. So what does it mean for you as a scientist working in the Ukraine at the moment when you hear the term public engagement? And I'm going to see if I can find the chat somehow. I might have to stop sharing momentarily and hope it doesn't cause major
We can also
problems.
help out, Helen, no worries.
Okay. So I'm just going to give people maybe a minute or so to pop things in the chat when they can. Bo, if you can see the chat and you want to kind of
Yeah,
give some
I'll read
out.
anything out. Yeah. And if it's more convenient for anyone, depending on circumstances, to just speak up as well. Please
Of
feel free to
course.
do that too.
Yes, please.
Olha is saying it's crowdsourcing.
Crowdsourcing.
Andri is saying citizens' involvement.
Yeah, brilliant. I would invite you to be, you don't just need to describe it. It might be how the term public engagement makes you feel. Everything from excited to stressed to overwhelmed to determined. You know, if you want to add those kinds of words into the chat, you could do that also. Um, it doesn't have to be a description, could be a feeling, could be a sense.
Oh, we have a little comment from Mikhailo. It's a kind of networking. It's funny that the director of my institute thought that engagement is too pompous of a word and used visit
Mm,
instead in a visa support letter.
mm. Yeah, the language is really important and quite kind of flexible and changeable around public engagement.
Ina is saying it's a participative approach.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to all of these terms in just a moment. People can keep adding them into the chat, but I'm going to move on. So when we think about public engagement, I think initially Uh, well, certainly when I began working in academia in the late 90s, public engagement probably meant a scientist standing on stage doing an experiment in front of a public audience, a kind of spectacular, making something go bang, creating some coloured smoke, something like that. And public engagement can mean that. But we in the Institute of Engagement use a graphic which we've adapted from Einstein's ladder of citizen participation from way back in 1969 to describe all of the things that we mean when we mean public engagement. So that kind of infusing and inspiring people, doing research demonstrations for public audiences sits in the first two rungs of the ladder in that kind of sense of communicating research in exciting and inspiring ways. And often when people first engage with a university, that's kind of what they're looking for. They want to kind of hear about research and be able to see it, feel it, understand it, but in a kind of, in a way that might be sitting back and listening initially. We move up the ladder when we think about making public engagement a bit more participatory. Offering communities of various kinds, whether they're defined as communities, geographic communities or communities of interest or particular age groups, offering them the opportunity to get involved, to try things out, to consult and engage with members of the university through various kind of opportunities to get stuck in. Then we also talk about public engagement. Colleagues on the call were thinking about things like participatory methods and creating opportunities to work with the public on research. And that for us sits in our kind of co-design and co-production rungs of the ladder, where academics are doing projects with public collaborators, and members of the public get the opportunity to collaborate and work together with academic researchers. And this is also how we would describe the kind of top rungs of the ladder, which are really offering communities or members of the public or particular special interest groups opportunities to set research agendas and take charge of research. So really the impetus for doing the research comes from members of the public themselves. And so we see that everything that sort of sits underneath public engagement in terms of the University of Warwick's work that we support comes somewhere on this ladder. We don't, so somebody said to me, why do you present this as a ladder? Because it might suggest that there's a hierarchy and that the kind of research communication stuff on the bottom rung of the ladder is less important than devolving power to communities at the top rung of the ladder. And I would say really we ought to kind of tip it on its side, because we recognise that different forms of research and different forms of knowledge sharing and different forms of community need mean that all of these rungs of the ladder are important, and all of these rungs of the ladder are necessary at different times and in different contexts. When we think particularly about the science context, I was trying to think about, well, what does this ladder look like within the sciences? And so in this diagram in front of you, you've got kind of on the left-hand side, starting with research communications and media and digital content creation, you've got those forms of research engagement that are about broadcasting research findings to a public audience, so telling people about the research that you're doing and sharing research findings with the public. And as this diagram moves from left to right, we move through various kinds of science engagement and involvement that shift towards, on the right-hand side, kind of more participatory and collaborative approaches to public involvement. So really we're seeing kind of public engagement to public involvement, though elements of this diagram will involve and engage in different ways. But yeah, this is I think where, certainly looking across the University of Warwick and looking in the wider UK context, we're seeing all forms of kind of science engagement and involvement happening. That just gives a sense of the spectrum. So would it be good to go back to the chat, Bo, and pick up any further thoughts or comments that have come in whilst I've been talking about the ladder and talking about that spectrum?
Yeah, and I've shared, by the way, the original Arnstein's piece of work as well, in case people wanted to explore that further. We have two more comments. There's actually they're both from Ilona, I've just noticed. The first one says it's a public budget, and the second comment is participation in policy development as its key stakeholder.
So the question about budget is really important one, and I'm going to go on to reflect very briefly in a little while how our budget has shifted and kind of what we promise to do based on what the needs are that our government has outlined as being the kind of really critical needs in working with the public in a short while. But I'll move on then to say something about the permeable university and what I mean by the permeable university and why that's important now. And whenever I'm talking about why we do public engagement, I sort of begin with a slide that talks about the challenges we're all facing. Often this slide will be populated by pictures that represent, all sorts of global challenges, from environmental challenges to, challenges relating to changes in our AI infrastructures and all kinds of things. But really, my feeling is that me sitting here and telling you about challenges that you might be facing feels crass, if not ridiculous, because I imagine that, I can't even imagine what it must be like to be trying to undertake research, to keep university work going, to continue to support students and innovate in a teaching space and continue to do innovative research in a wartime context. So I'm not about to tell you the challenges you're facing, but I can only imagine, and so it's important to recognise that context, I think, and also to sort of point towards the fact that our national body for public engagement has argued that how universities navigate crises is dependent on the quality of their engagement activity. So they describe the sensitivity to the context in which they're working and their ability to contribute value to society. So that sense of being an engaged university, as the National Coordinating Centre for Public Engagement describe it, as being a university that's like acutely attuned to the context it's working in, both the social, the kind of geographical challenges that universities are facing is dependent on the quality of their engagement activity, the extent to which they care about and engage with the publics who sit around them. And I really like the University of Lincoln's 21st Century Labs idea of the permeable university, which they wrote in their manifesto in 2019, the Permeable University Manifesto. So they argued that permeability should be the new lens which reframes the historic core activities of universities across organisational and national boundaries between different groups and communities, technologies and disciplines. So that's that idea that, universities should be able, first of all, to take their researchers out into the world, to encourage and enable their researchers to look beyond the kind of, in the UK, we refer to the ivory tower. The idea of the university is this kind of enclosed building, this space of knowledge that sits either on a hill, kind of separately from the town or city in which it's located, and rather to think about kind of removing the walls of the ivory tower and inviting academics to kind of take their work out into the world. Permeability also in the University of Lincoln's 21st Century Labs context is about enabling groups, communities, communities of interest, geographic communities to come into the university. So a big challenge around setting up, as Warwick has done, an Institute of Public Engagement is not just how do we get our people out into the world, but also how do we make the university a welcoming, inclusive, democratic space that invites people in to make the most of having a university sometimes on their doorstep. I'm not going to bore you too much with this. Looks a very dry slide. This is a recent government white paper which has set out what the government sees as the role for universities in the UK going forward. And this white paper, which was released in October last year, is really about compelling universities to refocus on their civic role. So it calls for a focus on raising aspirations and inspiring people, particularly in our local region, to succeed in life. So it's calling for the university to have a social and economic impact for the good in its local area. It's got a focus on the role that universities need to play in breaking down barriers to opportunity. It emphasises a sense of pride in place as critical, which might be understood as a pride in the universities that are located in a city or a region, but also, universities contributing to a broader sense of local, regional, perhaps even national pride, and an insistence that universities need to work collaboratively to develop their civic contribution, so that we can't sit separately from all the other organisations and services within a city, but rather we work. Sometimes people refer to universities as anchor institutions, as you probably already know. When we're thinking about the role that universities play in civic life, that question of what does it mean to be an anchor institution, to work alongside healthcare services or work alongside city councils and things like that. Again, lots of policy in the UK setting. We've been constantly compelled to think about the role of universities in civic society, and to consider, what good research and education is doing. And this raises a set of key questions about how universities can and communities can work together more effectively, ethically and creatively to use research in ways that genuinely benefit the region. It asks us to think about how we build reciprocal, equitable research partnerships, especially those exploring complex social issues. It asks us to consider what mechanisms are needed to make real civic impact and ensure that knowledge exchange is effective at a regional level. And that question, coming back to that idea of the anchor institution, what does it mean to see universities as a civic anchor institution capable of driving social and economic growth and change? So they're the kind of questions that come out of all that policy making and that literature, and they're questions that might form our discussion at the end of this presentation about what that idea of permeability might mean for you, both in your national and regional contexts, and also in relation to your particular disciplines. I'm aware that we're a really multidisciplinary group of people on this call today, and so these questions might mean different things to chemists, they might mean different things to people working in the health sciences, in computer science, and so on. Before I continue, is there any questions or points of challenge or points of clarification before we move on? I can only see a small number of people, so inviting people to either unmute and ask questions or pop them in the chat, and Bo can help with them.
Or please just raise your hand as well. That flags it. Give folks a second to think, and then we'll move on. Oh, there we have Mihailo. Go for it.
I have a question about the last statement that universities as civic anchor institutions capable of driving social and economic growth. This implies changes. This implies huge changes, and huge changes always have those who benefit and those who do not, and this is a possible source of conflict. And my question is, how do you deal with such things?
That's a really smart and interesting question, and I don't think I'm going to have a brilliant answer to that. I think that I think in my institutional context, we're trying to shift from a position of almost like a colonial approach to public engagement, right? So people going, I've got this research, I think it's going to be good for this particular community, and I'm going to go and make change because I see the change that I think needs making. And we're on a journey. The University of Warwick is on a journey, but it's a journey that others in HE are facing as well, to begin with identifying need through listening and through creating opportunities for communities to talk about, what's really critical to them, what are the challenges they are facing. In health research, that kind of move towards public and patient involvement in setting research agendas is how we will set research going that addresses social and economic change in some way. Now, there's a difficulty there, of course. I can imagine this is already kind of pinging in everyone's mind that only those who are most able to state their needs will get their needs heard, or only those who are most able to call for help will receive help. So, or all those who are most able create opportunities for partnership will receive those opportunities. So universities have to have a commitment to doing more listening, creating more opportunities, and striving for equity rather than simply setting those agendas themselves. But it's difficult. It's something that takes time, that really kind of critical listening and creating space for public discourse and discussion. In effect, creating a sort of functional public sphere as a university. It's hard. It's not going to happen overnight. So I'm sorry, that's a slightly fudged answer to your question, Michaela, but it's an honest answer. We need to do more listening, I think, is the bottom line, and we need to create opportunities for all to kind of to state their needs.
Thank you. It's thank you for your answer, and I agree with you that it's a hard problem.
I can imagine.
And,
I mean, I can imagine that in a context in which there are multiple crises, it must be even harder to know where to go first, who to listen to first, who to collaborate with first. So it is an endless piece of work to really listen carefully and create sort of democratic opportunities for communities to get involved with universities.
Helen, we have another question from Olha in chat here. Olha says, in our university, public engagement runs through individual departments. So I'm wondering, how do you manage it on a university level with so many disparate disciplines and departments?
Another really good question. So the Institute of Engagement was really set up in recognition of the fact that public engagement was happening in pockets all around our university, and that it looked like quite different things in different bits of the university. And so the first impetus for setting up an Institute of Engagement was to bring people together, to create opportunities for a community of practice, to start working with each other and to start sharing good practice, and so we were set up with a fellowship of members from around the university that helps to connect people up across the university and to help us better understand what public engagement was happening in individual departments and centres and faculties. We've also more recently in the Institute set up faculty public engagement leads. So Warwick is organised around 3 faculties, and we now have a colleague in each of those 3 faculties whose responsibility is to connect us into research departments, centres, education centres, and so on. So I think having an Institute of Engagement sort of helps join the dots between that really quite disparate practice, and we've certainly seen through our learning circles, for example, in the area of public involvement in research, we've seen our historians really learn from being in a learning community with our medics, our health researchers, who are quite further down the line in terms of involving the public in research. So creating opportunities for cross interdisciplinary conversation and collaboration has been really rich and really important to us. So yeah, a university is an enormous beast, and you can never really know what's going on in all of its corners and all of its nooks and crannies and all of its centres and buildings. So having a cross-university institute was set up to try and kind of draw out colleagues who are doing really exciting and innovative things with the public, to start conversations with one another, to learn from one another, to be trained alongside each other, to receive funding, to support cross-university collaboration and so on.
Thank you, Helen. And I popped a couple of links for people to find out a bit more about the fellowship, and then the link to the team that's got the 3 faculty leads as well to learn a bit more about their work.
Fantastic. Let's move on. I mentioned that when Juliana mentioned funding, that I was going to say something really briefly about our funding. I won't bore you with this for too long, but we're funded by half of our funding comes from the Higher Education Innovation Fund, and this has recently been reconsidered to really focus on the question of economic growth. So the current government is asking universities to spend this money in a way that benefits economic growth, and that raises some issues around the kind of how we demonstrate the link between public engagement and economic growth. We think when we're taking university research and education out into our community that we're having a positive impact. We're sharing, we're inspiring, we hear anecdotally, people coming to our events saying, this has had a big impact on me, I'm going to do something different as a result of coming to this event, or my child is intending to become a physicist or an astrophysicist as a result of coming to your event. But that's often what people think you want to hear when you've organised a public engagement event, and the line from public engagement to economic growth is actually quite a tricky one to kind of draw with real certainty. So on this slide is all the ways we help kind of local organisations build their capacity. We're funding collaborative work with small charities, with local cultural organisations and things, and cultural organisations further afield, like museums, like arts organisations, all sorts. So we help those organisations build capacity by pairing them up with some funding, with members of Warwick staff and our student body. But we think the broader argument is that public and cultural engagement improves social well-being and raises ambitions in ways that lead to greater economic security and productivity in our communities, that we've just got to figure out how best to track and prove that longer term. I've put prove in the short term, I meant prove in the long term. So that's one thing that's when resources are limited, and I'm sure colleagues will have thoughts about how limited resources impact our ability to do public engagement and involve the public in our research. Being able to show the impact is vital, is really important, though methodologically it's difficult to do, particularly sort of tracking, for example, the impact of a 12-year-old coming along to a hackathon, who might in I don't know, 10 or 15 years time be going on to study at a university off the back of taking part in a public engagement event like a hackathon or design sprint or something like that. that's really important impact, but hard to track over a long period of time. We hear anecdotally, I was speaking to a group of students last week about public engagement, and one of the students in the room who's studying for a computer science master's program said, basically, I'm here because when I was 14, I had the opportunity to go into a university and talk to academics and people from the industry about computer design, and that's my life took a course as a result of that activity. So anecdotally, we hear about the impact of those kinds of things, but tracking it long term is difficult. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Institute of Engagement now and show you some examples. And I'm hoping I'm going to be able to share some videos if they work. It's always a bit dodgy on Zoom, but let's give it a go. So this is us. This is our mission. Our mission is to empower the University of Warwick's community to connect meaningfully with the wider world through inclusive, innovative and impactful public engagement. We particularly champion collaboration between staff, students and communities to share knowledge, to foster dialogue and to inspire change. And by embedding engagement into the heart of university culture, from everything from research to how and what we teach, we aim to make research and learning accessible, relevant and transformative for all. Along with our mission, we've written a manifesto of 8 commitments, and these are commitments to our community, both our university community and also the wider world in which we sit, to bring public engagement, to kind of put public engagement and public involvement at the forefront of what we do as a university. I'm not going to talk through all of these commitments, and I think Bo will be sharing the slides afterwards, and you'll have some more time to look at each of them. And I'm happy always to take questions after the session if anything strikes you as interesting or you want to learn more. But I'm going to zoom in on a few bits of our work and say a bit more about them in some more detail. So firstly, one of the key things, as well as creating that kind of professional network of people involved in public engagement, when the Institute of Engagement was set up, we were also set up to create an events programme. And this events programme was to be one of the ways that the public understands what the university is and what we do here. It was also set up so that it was easier for Warwick staff and students to reach the public, because we set up a kind of a festival brand. We run a series of festivals on campus each year. Last year we ran the Festival of Science and Technology and the Festival of Arts and Culture. This year we're running a single Resonate festival. Resonate is our events brand, and that will involve showcasing research from all across the university. And those on-campus festival days are particularly focused on young people. So they're seen as intergenerational events. Families turn up, around about 1,000 people. This year's festival might be slightly larger because we're just running one. But yes, people turn up and wander around the campus and go into university buildings and have an opportunity to engage in kind of hands-on research-based activity. We also ran a series of roadshows last year. It was Warwick's 60th anniversary, and we took our kind of festival brand off campus and into community venues, largely co-curating those activities with those community venues. We also run every year the Resonate Lates programme. So this is a year-round set of evening events for an adult audience, which are largely thematically based, so they're interdisciplinary, and they're largely structured around a series of short talks which are tailored for a wide public audience, so no specialist knowledge needed to understand the talks, and then space for discussion and debate. And that's been really important to our programme. I think when we started out, we were still in that kind of, we're going to broadcast, we're going to tell you about our research mode, and we've shifted far more to, we're going to do that, but always alongside creating space for discussion and debate. And then we support other public engagement events throughout the year that sit outside of our regular programme. Feedback from our events programme shows that the events have a very positive impact on how people feel about the university, that attendees nearly all say they've learned something new. I presume that the 5% of attendees who say they haven't learned something new were already very well informed to begin with. And 87% of attendees intended to use or share the things they'd learned at the event in the future. So that's really important because that's about, you know, again, thinking about impact, the impact of public engagement. It's not just us putting on a show and then people going away and it having no effect. It's also really important that people take things away that they've learned and go and make changes either at home for themselves or within their wider community. And on average, about a third of the people attending our events were attending a university event for the first time. And that's important to us going forward, that we're not just kind of speaking to the regular people who come along to each event. We do have people who come along to everything we do, but also that we're finding ways, often in partnership with other organisations, with charities, with the third sector, we're finding ways to reach new attendees, new audiences. We've got lots of feedback that suggests these events are very popular, and people talk about inspiration a lot, that's important to me, that sense that we're inspiring people for the future. This is what our region looks like. The blue splodges just show you, so the university is slap bang in the middle of the kind of largest blue dots between Kenilworth and the bottom part of Coventry, but it gives you a sense of people coming largely from our wider region, and we'd like to see that growing so that we're reaching more people in more places in our local region. I just want to zoom in on one event, and I know that there's health researchers on the call today who might find this particularly interesting. This was an event we put on at Coventry's main theatre earlier last year with colleagues from the Women's Health Mission at Warwick. So it was a focus on women's health. We had an external guest speaker. You can see her on the right-hand side, Dr. Nigat Arif, who's a kind of celebrity GP, but also an advocate for women's health rights. And she and colleagues from the Women's Health Mission came and spoke about women's health and spoke about their research. And then again, we had that kind of structured space for debate and discussion. I'm going to, I hope, play you a video. You'll hear firstly from my colleague in the middle of the slide here, Andrew McCainch, who's head of the medical school, talking about the value of public engagement to his researchers. And then you'll also hear from Eleanor Harrison, who's a third-year PhD student in the Greaves lab, which is a lab that focuses on endometriosis. And Eleanor will talk about why she's involved in public engagement. So I'm hoping that this will play. Let's see. Bo, can you shout to me if you can't hear the video?
Hi, so I'm Andrew McCainch. I'm the protein.
There is a sound.
And I'm also a scientist, and I have a research lab working on chromosomes. Trust is important. I think scientists have a duty to make progress for the population, but this means that the population needs to really understand what scientists actually do. And we need to have an open dialogue between the public and the scientist. This might be situations where actually the public asks us questions about, how do we understand a certain disease? And the scientist will have to tell you, we don't yet know. This is important. This actually shows the public that science is important, the research is critically important if we are to solve the problems that really matter to them. One of the things we really want to see more of is the public actually engaging in our research. And public engagement is the way to do that. We recently had an event at the Belgrade Theatre in Coventry, and it was striking how at the end the number of women and girls approach and ask, how can we help? How can we actually help you make a difference to us? And I think it's about how we now set up to make that actually happen that's really important for us.
Hi, my name's Eleanor. I'm a third-year PhD. I've done a few different things with the Warwick Institute of Engagement. I started off doing an internship with them, and then more recently I've been taking my research out into various different activities and engagement events, just sharing about women's health and endometriosis in general. So I think engagement, particularly around women's health, is really important. I think people should be able to access knowledge, be empowered in knowledge of their own bodies, particularly around things like menstrual health, where there's been a lot of taboos and stigma. It's been really great to get hands-on with different activities, getting people just talking about periods and the uterus in a way that's like just really free and open and fun.
So I just wanted to zoom in on a couple of things that are mentioned by my colleagues there. So firstly, that sense of empowerment through knowledge that Eleanor was talking about at the end there is really critical to us. So we had this comment, was one of a number of comments from people attending the event that said, thank you for hosting. I've learned more about my own body in one night than I have in the last 60 years. So that sense of really helping people to understand complex ideas in an accessible way is really kind of, the importance of that is borne out by comments like these. The other thing to focus on is the fact that Andrew mentioned the route from public engagement to public involvement in research. I was really struck when we were hosting the second part of the evening at the We Need to Talk About Women's Health event by people, first of all, asking really interesting questions about their research, the research that had been presented, then asking questions about their own bodies and their own health, and we enabled them to do that anonymously as well as on the mic in person. But then thirdly, we had a kind of wave of people towards the end of the session saying, exactly as Andrew explained, what do you need from us? How can we help support this research? How can we get involved? So that point about collaborative impacts and co-design change for the good of society is really critical, and sort of moving from telling people about University of Warwick research to kind of involving them in undertaking that research, involving them in designing that research, involving them in shaping what that research will look like in the future is really critical. The other thing, we've already mentioned some of this, so I'm going to skip over this slide quite quickly. We're trying to facilitate change in our institution through our faculty public engagement leads, through our membership and our fellowship. So our fellows are people who are really already doing public engagement. Our members can be anybody who wants to find out more about it, and our membership includes people from outside of the university as well as within it, so anyone can become a member of the Institute of Engagement to find out more about what we're doing, what we fund, how we're supporting public engagement. They can come and take part in our training programs. They can find out about how to develop their public engagement practice, whether they're a member of the Warwick staff and student community or not. And then we're also, as well as delivering all of that training and support and funding for public engagement activity, we're ensuring that staff and students are recognised for their contributions, so that they're awarded for really outstanding work in the field. Now, I was going to show this video. This is my colleague Felicity Boardman, again from the medical school, talking about an interactive art installation that she was involved in. She commissioned an arts organisation called Stamp to create an enormous sculpture and interactive installation at a local museum that helped members of the public understand her work, which is into kind of chromosomal yeah, what's the word I'm looking for? I end up explaining all kinds of people's research that really is kind of way beyond my understanding. But Felicity's particularly interested in genetic disorders that people are born with, and talking to the public about them. We can come back to this video, but it's quite long. I'll make sure that you've all got access to it after the fact as well. It's worth watching because it's particularly interesting because it shows a really award-winning academic collaborating with an award-winning arts organisation to make something that's really kind of accessible and interactive for the public. The other thing I just wanted to zoom in on, so one of the things that we do is fund collaboration between Warwick staff and students and external collaborators to do impactful public engagement. These are relatively small pots of money, up to £3,000 to undertake a collaborative project. And if you have a look on our website, you'll see a really wide variety of projects led by mainly Warwick staff, but some students and across all three faculties that have helped develop new practice and policy, that have led to ongoing relationships, that have led to further funding and new knowledge and resources being created, as well as having an impact on what and how we teach at Warwick. There's another video here, again, probably not got time to show it, but this showcases collaboration between particularly colleagues from life sciences at Warwick, who are doing really innovative research into crop growth, and they worked with a local community centre who were planting their own garden and wanted to understand more about the kinds of crops and things that they could grow. And it ended up being a collaboration between folks in the Institute of Engagement, our University Arts Centre, and the community centre, along with academics in the crop centre. And again, it's a really lovely video, because what you'll hear is people speaking from all angles about why they got involved in this project, from the folks that run the community centre to the professors at Warwick who are doing the research, to artists who took part in this collaboration, and most importantly, community members and what they took away from it. But I want to stop there. And I want to stop with this question, really, which is a question back to you. So what does permeability look like in your disciplines and your institutions? Why is it, or could it be important for you? And what do you need to make your discipline or your institution more permeable? So I'm going to try and, will it let me copy both of those things? I wanted to pop these into the chat. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Stop share. Okay, and then I'm going to pop these questions into the chat for us to consider. So paste. What does permeability look like in your institutions? And why is it, or could it be, important for you? And what do you need to make your discipline or your institution more permeable? So inviting comments, really. Please just unmute, or you can raise your hand, or you could put a comment into the chat. I realise that a lot of what I've spoken about is public engagement and involvement in the Warwick context, in the UK context, and I'm really interested to hear whether this concept of permeability is something that's kind of evocative or useful when you're thinking about your own disciplines and your own institutions.
We have a hand from Olha. Olha, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Helen.
Hi,
I really enjoyed your presentation, and I all the way through I thought about our image center. At least that's what it's called at our university. It's a relatively new department, I could say, in our university. But it's mostly focused on attracting new students to our university. So it's mostly about engaging with school children or college students who could come to study with us. And so most of our events are not so much research focused, but rather like professional orientation. But we still try to engage with these kids. And one of our popular activities is, for example, having them recognize different metals by sight. So we have samples and they have to guess which is which. And most of them really enjoy this activity. So that's how it's done at our university.
which university are you from, Olha?
It's now called National University Zaporizhia Polytechnic, so it's in the south of Ukraine.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really interesting comment, and that relationship between public engagement and recruitment is an interesting one. I met with a colleague from the University of Sydney recently, and she said they'd done something really clever, which is they'd given each child who came to get involved in the kinds of activities that the Image Centre at your university is organising. They gave each child a kind of identifying code. So whenever they logged onto a university system to book things, this code was used over and over again. And what this enabled them to do was to look at whether they were getting any of those children back to them as recruits to the university, as incoming students, because the code followed them back in. I guess what it doesn't show is all of the other places that those children might have gone to as a result of having an opportunity to, as you described, identify metal, for example. So, it doesn't, doing what colleagues at the University of Sydney doesn't sort of show the really wider impacts of that public engagement, but it really clearly demonstrated the relationship between public engagement at that particular institution and future recruitment. So yeah, really, really interesting. I can see there's a comment, Lilia in the chat has said, permeability in our discipline is reflected in interdisciplinary research, integration of education and research, and institutional openness to collaboration. It enables the circulation of knowledge, researchers and practices beyond formal structural boundaries. That interdisciplinarity is really interesting. Again, like often those people who are committed to taking research into a public space are also open to thinking about what they do from different angles. And I've seen that particularly, I mentioned the example of Felicity and her work with STAMP. I've seen that particularly when scientists start working with artists and then start working with other researchers across the institution, and the arts becomes kind of a place, a space for researchers to meet and to kind of cross-pollinate ideas. So yeah, that openness to collaboration and thinking about what collaboration might mean beyond disciplinary boundaries is really key. Thanks, Lilia. Other thoughts about what permeability looks like for you at the moment, or what you might need to make your discipline or your institution more permeable in the future.
Dear participants, you can put it on chat, your comments, or use microphone if it's possible for you. Mihailo, we see you. Please go ahead.
Yes, I think that my institution needs the most to have some kind of permeability is a good way to measure impacts of permeability, because I have seen and my colleagues have seen a very large amount of bad examples and bad reports about outcomes of permeability in different projects, and these reports focused on the number of meetings online and offline, geography, and so on. And this is not something interesting at all. What should be presented about in reports so that I can prove that it is worth their time?
I think that's which discipline do you come from, Mihailo?
Space research.
Thank you. I think it's absolutely critical, and there's another step to what you raise as well, which is also about having a commitment, particularly when you're working in collaborative ways with community members, with members of the public, having a commitment to share and collaborate on that wider impact of what's coming out of the research. We've had a meeting recently with various public collaborators who mentioned to us that one thing that frequently happens when they've worked on a university project is at a certain point they kind of get dropped off the communication about impact, and so it's like it's all very well, like we took our time and we put our effort and energy into being part of this this research, but we don't know what it's really achieved. So we need to commit not only to sharing, measuring impact and sharing it with our colleagues, but also with our collaborators too. And I'm really keen that the kind of, the experience of being involved in a permeable or civic university is a good one at the start. So, you know, at the very beginnings of that relationship, throughout the course of that relationship, whether it's attending a public engagement event or being part of a collaborative research project, and then at the end as well, we often forget about how important it is to look after people's interests at the end of something.
So there is nothing specific, and we just need to write good reports and meaningful reports. Is that your answer?
Yeah, I think good reports, meaningful reports, and reports that are accessible to your collaborators. I guess, you know, the question of how to track the long-term impacts of public engagement and public involvement remains something that colleagues across the sector are trying to understand. At Warwick, we've just started a new collaborative research project with our sister institution in Australia, at Monash University, which is particularly focused on the long-term impacts of public engagement in the arts and social sciences. But there's lots of interesting literature on this, I'll share a link in the chat to an open source journal in the UK called Engagement for All, which publishes regularly findings on the impacts of public engagement and public involvement in all disciplines. So I'll try and fish that out while we're wrapping up the meeting and pop it into the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, so much. Maybe we have another comment for now. Chat. No, we have nothing. No, we have one from Helen. I also share it in WhatsApp chat. Maybe some of you have comment.
Thank you.
Olha again, raise hand.
I'm sorry for hogging all the time, but
No, please.
It's
a
okay,
topic.
it's great.
It's a topic very close to my heart, I guess. So I was wondering if you could maybe provide some advice or insights, because my research is in metallurgy or material science, and it's pretty complex for people who aren't experts in the field. So I was wondering if we were to host some events for adults, for example, but how can we explain our research so that people could be interested in it and understand why it matters?
I've got lots of thoughts on this, but I'll share just a few. I think one of the things that we've done in the Institute that's made a really big difference in relation to this, and it isn't always a popular move with people who are involved in delivering our events. So every event that we do, we insist that there is a rehearsal for the event that involves members of my team who are all research engagement and involvement professionals, and we reckon that we're quite a broad group. We have some historians, some scientists, some social scientists in our mix, and we sort of insist that people rehearse whatever their activity or presentation, whatever is going out to the public with us, and we find that early career researchers are always really up for doing this, and the harder sell is getting the most senior professor to say, I know you've done a million talks and you've appeared in public a million times, but trust us, please, let's rehearse and see if we can make sense of what it is you're talking about. So helping people just tweak their language so that language that's used is accessible, and describing kind of complex science but in an accessible way is supported by our colleagues. The other really important thing, and we say this to people all the time, is I think, when I think about as a researcher, what it feels like to present my research to colleagues at a conference, maybe. You feel like you want to write a conference paper that tells people absolutely everything you know on a particular topic, and you can be quite complex and you can be quite detailed in how you're presenting. We ask people not to try and tell if they were presenting in the kinds of activities that the Image Centre at your university puts on, not to worry about telling everybody absolutely everything you know, but perhaps telling them part of what you know, which is going to enable their thinking, their understanding of a complex problem, their approach to the world. Allow that to shift in a small way. So we don't have to share absolutely everything we know on a topic in order to create engaging activities. And the other thing is being really sensitive to the audience you expect. I mean, it's not rocket science. That sense of if you're going to be speaking to a room full of 10-year-olds, or you're going to be speaking to a retired community, or you're going to be speaking to a bunch of teenagers, pitch accordingly, think of activities that are appropriate for that group. So really rehearse, don't try and say everything, and think about who it is you're talking to, were the three really key things. Lily has a question in the chat, which has been, what has actually worked best in your experience to coordinate engagement activities at a university level without creating additional bureaucracy or over-centralised control? Well, that's a really good question. I think since we haven't been going that long. We were set up about 5 years ago to support public engagement in the university, and I think the really key things are creating opportunities for people to meet and talk. So that our learning circles. We have a series of learning circles around particular topics. So a learning circle that thinks about pedagogy and public engagement, a learning circle that thinks about best inclusive practices. We've got a learning circle that thinks about the future of public engagement and particularly digital skills for public engagement. Lots of different topics. So creating opportunities for people to meet and talk has been really impactful. I think the other thing is, and we're lucky that we're supported by the university and we have a budget to give out. I think the budget that the pots of money that we award to people for doing public engagement are relatively modest. Our largest one is £3,000 for a year's activity. And out of that relatively small investment has come such massive change in terms of, new policies, new exhibitions, new educational strategies, new writing, a whole range of things. So I think creating opportunities that precisely aren't overly bureaucratic, giving people quite easy access to a little bit of seed funding to develop a collaborative relationship in the community has also been really impactful. And trying to make, the third thing would be trying to make public engagement events as easy for staff and students to get involved in as possible. So we say, we'll do all the organisational stuff, we'll find the attendees, we'll book the rooms, we make everything that we do free. So all activities are free to members of the public to join. We've also provided transport to get people to wherever our activities are taking place. We usually provide a meal or some kind of hospitality, some kind of food that goes along with coming to a public engagement event. And that's trying to make it as easy as possible for members of the public who might have all kinds of barriers to attending an event that a university runs, feel welcome, feel honoured, feel respected. And so that sense of creating an events programme that makes it as easy as possible for people to attend and as easy as possible for staff and students to take part. We do the kind of heavy lifting in terms of organisation. That means that they just really need to concentrate on the content and thinking about how they're going to engage people with their research. So they're the kind of three key things. Sorry, that was quite a long answer to your question.
So last
Sorry, mute for a second.
I think Ludmila had some issues, right? With her mic, so probably
yes,
we had
I
all
had
the
some
questions.
issues with the sound.
So it's fine. I think we had all the questions, right, already been asked.
I would really encourage everybody to please get in touch if they want to ask something really specific about support for their institution or support for their discipline in public engagement and public involvement. Please do circulate my email address and please feel free to get in touch at any time. And those of you who end up coming to Warwick, I hope to see you while you're over. It's been a real pleasure and an honour to talk to you today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.